Okay, so the other big objection that does bother me personally and always has is the an evolutionary debunking argument against our moral beliefs.
Yeah.
So, really rough and ready form. The problem is that our cognitive faculties evolved for survivability, rather than to direct us towards truth.
Yeah.
And it may be that some of our beliefs are true, but it would only be incidentally because those beliefs helped us survive. And in some cases, anyway, it's pretty clear why we have the moral beliefs we do, given that we evolved according to the theory of evolution and natural selection. And so, for instance, at least one example that's given is our the heightened moral significance that we attach to family members as opposed to just members of the general population. That seems very morally relevant, that we have certain special obligations to our family members that we don't have to Joe on the street that I just met.
Yeah.
And yet there is an evolutionary explanation for that that's relatively plausible. It's helped us survive to place preference on our kin rather than just everybody. So let's say
Yeah.
that generalizes and that all of our moral beliefs can be that our developing these moral beliefs can be explained via these selective pressures, blah 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 blah. If I learned that, and it does seem at least somewhat plausible given evolution's success at explaining other facets of the human person, that would make me doubt that the moral beliefs I have are true or at least justified. What do you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. If you doubt that they're justified, you should also doubt that they're true. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, or yeah, I guess the difference between doubting moral realism and then just doubting our access to the moral realm. But it would be weird
oh yeah.
deny one but not the other. Anyway,
Yeah. Well, so sometimes the debunking argument is supposed to show that, well, if there are moral, maybe there are moral facts, but if there are, we just don't know them. We don't know what they are. They're probably not the ones that we believe. Um, and like that example is a good example. Like if you think that your family, uh, the people who coincidentally share a lot of your genes are more important than the people who don't share your genes. It's like, okay, so on the face of it, there's something weird about that when you just think about that abstractly. That's weird. Why would that be? And also, like, other people can say the same thing. They can say that their family is more important than your family, and you're like, why am I special? And then you adopt the belief, oh, like value is agent relative. So actually, my family is more important to me. Their family, okay. But if you just think about that, that is a weird set of facts. It's like way more plausible that you're just biased than that those are the objective facts. Okay. But then the question is like, oh, how much does that generalize? Well, that really doesn't generalize, right? Like it doesn't generalize to, universalistic, cosmopolitan, liberal beliefs, right? It exactly doesn't. It's exactly the opposite, right? So that is, this is a good, the debunking approach is a good response to people who have certain moral belief systems. And of course, by its very nature, it's not good against people who have different value systems. Okay, so, and this is related to what I was saying about how values have changed over time. So it used to be like, whatever in primitive societies, it was considered okay to attack neighboring tribes to conquer them. Actually, that was considered glorious. And the reason why Alexander the Great was that he murdered a lot of people and stole their land, right? And conquered them and forced them to serve him or whatever like that. That was great. And today we would call him like, a colonialist, whatever, evil oppressor. So, okay. So you could explain one of these value systems, but you can't explain both of them. You could explain the ancient value system as being an adaptation because the people who did this conquering activity were more successful in spreading their genes. But if you give that explanation, you can't explain our modern value system where we reject that. Okay, so then the modern value system is probably objectively true. Okay, it's the result of overcoming our biases that were instilled by evolution.
You got a good point. Let me press into that a bit more. That do you deny then that there are evolutionary explanations for some of our modern day moral beliefs or our inclination to accept them? You would deny that for some of those there is an evolutionary explanation for that inclination.
Yeah, you can probably still find things. So, I could think an example would be the thought that our species is more important than the other species. There's like an obvious reason why we would have that bias. Yeah, maybe we are more important, right? But like, you know, we attribute way more importance to ourselves than we probably objectively have, like compared to the other life forms. Like that's plausible. Um, probably like a lot of things about things surrounding sexual morality, we probably have a lot of biases about. There's sort of like, particularly these things where like you treat men and women differently. It's like male promiscuity is admired. Promiscuous males are studs, which is a good thing, but promiscuous females are sluts, which is a bad thing. Like that's weird. That's a weird double standard. Uh, there's sort of like an obvious evolutionary explanation for that. So yeah, there are biases that we still haven't overcome. You might say.
But take just the most fundamental moral principle we take for granted, that murder is wrong. It doesn't seem at all unlikely to me that there is an evolutionary explanation for that belief. I would imagine that groups of people that believed murder was a-okay really wouldn't make it that long. But does that but the explanation for you wouldn't
So
call into question this moral belief or make it seem like a bias? Like, why is that?
okay, but as a side point, you said, oh, so groups of people who accepted murder wouldn't last that long. And this appears to be appealing to the group selectionist model of evolution,
Mm,
which is objectively wrong.
okay.
Like
All right.
the,
Fair.
the correct version of evolutionary psychology is individual selectionist, or more precisely, gene selectionist. Right? That is, selection operates on the individual gene level. It doesn't operate on groups. So, right, and so the reasoning is okay. Well, suppose it's like, you're in a group that is against murder, but you personally are okay with murder. And so then the other members of your group don't murder you because they're against murder. But if you have an opportunity to profit by murdering one of them, then you do it. Okay. Then you would be more successful. And then your genes would spread in that group. And so then your genes should take over. Right. So that, and it doesn't, and by doing that, you're making the group as a whole less fit to survive, but that doesn't matter, right? Because your genes are still going to take over the group.
But then they would probably die in the long term. Like that lineage would die out because the group would die out. So then it wouldn't
Yeah,
propagate into
well,
the
yeah.
future.
I mean, it would have to be pretty severe, right? But okay, like so. Here's the thing: like, why isn't everyone an egoist? There's the view in ethics called ethical egoism, right? Where people think that actually the right thing to do is to serve yourself all the time. Okay, so that's an ethical theory, but it's extremely unpopular. And why would that be? Right? Because like we're always hearing in evolutionary psychology, we're always hearing about how selfishness, evolution explains selfishness, right? And these evolutionary psychologists, like they can't consistently turn around and go, oh no, like you know, evolution leads to altruism because group selection, whatever. When they explain so many other things, by appeal to the self interest of that individual organism, right? So, um, anyway, like it seems like if the cause of our moral beliefs lay in genes, then we should be egoists, and almost no one is.
I guess my doubts arise from the fact that group selection does seem plausible to me, but I am not an evolutionary biologist or really know anything at all about biology, so I'll take your word for it. It just seems on the surface right to me that if you might initially have great success propagating your genes if you were uh, an egoist and everyone around you was not. But it does seem right that eventually that society couldn't sustain itself as too many people became egoists and they couldn't work together and it all collapsed. So that there's some level of evolutionary pressure towards, say, altruism of some kind.
Well, okay, so like if you're, um, I don't know, like if your selfishness is so destructive that it brings down your whole society, then your genes will not propagate. Okay, but if you have, okay, but if you have a lesser degree of selfishness, it doesn't bring down your whole society, then they will propagate. And the thing is, like, you should expect this to happen independently in every society. right? So like, you might be thinking, oh, but like your society will be outcompeted by the society that's full of altruists. No, because that society that's full of altruists, it will get infected by an egoist, and then the egoist genes, right? And so like, you might think, oh, competition between societies will make it so that the ones that are more cooperative will survive. But no, every single one of them will be taken over by the egoists if the egoists actually have greater reproductive success within their society. Okay, but now why did that not in fact happen? It's like, not everyone is a psychopath. Like, people are selfish. Normal people are selfish, but they're not maximally selfish. So why are normal people not like psychopaths? Yeah, well, basically because if you act too selfish, other people do things to you. Like, other people will punish you, right? And like, if the rest of your society finds out that you're a psychopath, they will do something about it. Like, they'll throw you in prison. Our society will throw you in prison, but in other societies, they might just kill you or whatever. Right. Okay, but so that's to say that being overly selfish isn't really in your interests, or being overly selfish in a way that's detectable by others is not really in your interest. So, in a sense, it's not really selfish.
But wouldn't that provide something of an evolutionary explanation at some level of your relevant moral beliefs that maybe
Yeah.
not like actually in the biological evolutionary sense, but the evolution of culture and society? That's really what explains your moral beliefs to not be super selfish rather than the intuition.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, yeah. What I guess we have to sort of identify a more specific moral belief that people would have. Um, but so, suppose there's a belief that everybody matters equally, as held by utilitarians, but basically is held by almost all moral philosophers. Some kind of equal consideration of interests. Um, is that evolutionarily beneficial? Well, like, you could say that, but then you can't explain why throughout history, like, people thought it was okay to attack other societies, attack neighboring tribes, and like kill the men and kidnap the women and kill the children. Um, right, but the other thing, like, some of the examples that are most compelling as cases for debunking are cases where when you state the belief, it sounds weird when you think about it. Okay, so like, yeah, I mentioned like the double standard where like it's worse for women to be promiscuous than men, and like you can tell this just like as soon as like teenagers figure out that we have this double standard, they notice that there's something weird about it, right? Like, everybody can notice there's something weird about that. Okay, but nobody notices something weird about the idea that everyone deserves equal consideration of interests. Like, you don't need to explain why that would be the case. You need to explain why it wouldn't be the case. If you think some people deserve more consideration than others, you have to explain what's special about those people. You don't have to explain why there wouldn't be something special.
Okay, I'm satisfied with that one.